That's the sad part, really. So this then begs the next question, Javin, which is, what are some solutions to these issues?
If you took Economics 101, you would think of these simple solutions. Maybe stop printing money. It's just funny that the Inflation Reduction Act did the quite opposite of what the name says. We had these checks going out during COVID and all these ominous spending bills that just added more money to the economy. The Build Back Better. We did not build back better. We were building back broke. It did not work. So there's the spending side. Energy, when it comes to gas and fuel, and even heating your house. Arizona, we've seen energy bills go up. Even me here, I'm not home very much, and apparently I'm using less energy than I did last year, but my bill is higher because energy has just gone up. So we need to unleash American energy, unleash American abundance.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential. And here's your host, Jeff Crank.
Hey everyone, my name is John Whitmer, and Jeff has been a little busy, so the podcast asked if I could be the guest host for this episode. I'm a former member of the Kansas House of Representatives and the host of the John Whitmer Show on here in Wichita, Kansas, on 98.7 and 1330 KNSS. My show airs Sunday nights at 7. We discuss core conservative principles like limited government, individual liberty, free enterprise, and traditional values. You know, all the things that liberals love to hate. Today, we're going to talk about the economy because it's something that is affecting everyone, no matter what state you live in, with the rising cost of groceries and gas prices still being higher than what they were in 2020. People are having to make cuts and adjustments to their lives because of it. Part of the reason this is happening is because Washington has passed billion-dollar spending packages, and the Biden-Harris administration has been canceling oil and gas leases, which now makes America more dependent on foreign oil and vulnerable to the potential of higher oil prices due to what is happening in those countries. Americans for Prosperity has been traveling all around the country, helping Americans out by either lowering gas prices, giving food away at restaurants, or giving out grocery gift cards. The reason for these events is not only to save Americans some money, but also to educate folks and point out the policies that have helped lead to the increases in prices that are impacting folks. Americans for Prosperity has had multiple people traveling with the National Prosperity is Possible tour, and our guest today has not only been on this year's tour, but previous tours as well. He's well-traveled. I want to welcome Javin Fulson, who is a Grassroots Program Manager at Americans for Prosperity. Javin, thank you for joining me today. It's nice to have a fellow traveler with us.
Yes, John. Thanks for having me. Thanks for filling in for Jeff.
I understand that before we get started, I understand you have an interesting story about the first time you voted.
Yes, I do. Yeah. So it was 2019 election, actually, where I went to go vote for the first time, and I'm leaving the voting booth. And usually when you leave, they usually give you little "I voted" stickers. But this time when I left, they didn't give me a sticker. So when I'm there, I'm like, hey, where are the stickers at? And I know that sounds crazy, but I'm like, where are the stickers at? And they're like, oh, we're not doing them this year. I said, oh, okay. So I go back in my car and I kind of look up "I voted" stickers. Maybe it's just this voting this voting place where there's no stickers. So I go online, I see there's no stickers in the state of Louisiana this year. I'm like, what's the issue? Apparently it's budget, it's spending. So what do? I go and I print the whole Louisiana budget out, and I see where are we spending money and where can we possibly cut so that we can spend money on stickers. And some may ask, why are stickers so important? So for me as a young voter, we live in a time where social media is the priority of most people my age, good or bad. And the way I see the sticker, it's a way of people in my generation, or even all generations, to take that picture and post on social media and say either A, I did something good, or feel part of a community. So that was the reason why I thought it was so important for us to have I voted stickers. So I go and print out this budget, and it takes me about 3 to 4 days to actually go through the whole entire Louisiana budget. And while I'm going through it, I'm like, really? We spend money here, here, here? This is ridiculous. And then actually that's where I really learned how much we spend on education in the state. And I'm like, where's our return on investment? There's nothing there. So that kind of got me really interested in the education piece of policy. But after that, I did the whole review. I wrote a letter to our Secretary of State, to, at the time, my representatives, state representatives, and to the under commission to the Secretary of State. Took about 2-3 weeks. I finally got a letter back from our Secretary of State, him kind of saying, I appreciate you being engaged. It's great that you did this. He said pretty much, yeah, you're right. We need to find money somewhere. Fortunately, after that, ever since, we've had stickers at every election. I'm not saying I did it, but you can't tell me I didn't. But that was definitely a big pound of back for me. And actually, fast forward too, I ran into the Secretary of State, I think like 2 years ago, and asked him about the letter, and he didn't know anything about it. But then I ran into his secretary, and she said, "Oh my gosh, I remember that letter. Yes, you were the only person that actually wrote a letter that was handwritten." I was like, "Oh wow, okay." Or at the time, I said, "Wow, that's definitely incredible." So that was my first touch with politics and policy, and I was like, "This is incredible. This is why it's so important to get engaged and actually what's going on, because a simple letter, I'm not saying I changed anything, but a simple letter can have that kind of impact."
Javin, I mentioned I'm a fellow traveler because I drove the bus actually for our last 2 gubernatorial statewide bus tours. And I talked about it a little bit in the intro, but can you tell us a little bit more about what the Prosperity is Possible tour is?
Yeah, so we've been running the Prosperity is Possible tour for at least 2 years now. And on the onset, when we started, we're seeing across the country that for many Americans, the American dream just doesn't feel attainable anymore. And for us, we're seeing most of that due to the overspending coming from Washington. We're seeing inflation at a 19-year high, and more Americans are struggling to make the ends meet and having to keep up with higher prices like gasoline and the grocery bill. So our thing was, what do we do about it? The only solution was to rent and to get a big 29-foot RV and travel the country and talking to folks about this, actually go on the ground and get these stories, because you don't have organizations like us doing that. I mean, we have to remember Americans for Prosperity is one of the leading grassroots organizations in the country. So we're the ones that need to be and are leading the way to have these kind of conversations. So that was one big thing. Another big thing was for Americans for Prosperity to increase our brand ID and to reach all 50 states. And I think it's safe to say that we hit close to 50, excluding Alaska and Hawaii, but we hit close to those 50 states on these tours in the past 2 years. But yeah, so we were focused on mainly 3 big things: the spending coming from Washington, the attack on energy coming from Washington, and the attack on labor. So we wanted labor reform, energy reform, and spending reform. And if you remember, the energy reform at the time when we did it, H.R. 1 was the Lower Energy Act, which the House passed, but it died in the Senate. That would make America more energy abundant. And then we have labor reform, the PRO Act, which is still trying to be pushed through the Senate at least. And that was pretty much going to make those contract workers less independent and employees of those they work for. So we were very against that, because we are very focused on individual freedom, and everyone should have the opportunity to live the American dream.
You've held close to 80 events across the country, traveled over 12,000 miles. You've been on several tours. So which states have you not been to yet, and which states have been your favorite so far? And you better say Kansas at least on one of those.
Course,
so.
yeah, of course. Actually, I'll say I don't know if I personally ever been to Kansas. I know the tour has.
We can fix that.
So yeah, I can. I definitely do want to go to Kansas. I definitely want to go to Wichita. I mean, I want to go to the aviation capital of the world, or the country, probably, or maybe the world. Let's see. I mean, I'm gonna say excluding Alaska and Hawaii because those are obvious ones. Ones I haven't been to. Oof, I don't even know. I can't even think of one I haven't been to. I've even been to California. I will say California was a very nice state to go to. Some people were very surprised by that answer, but it's beautiful. It is a beautiful.
Oh, it's a gorgeous state. I was born and raised there. You just don't want to live there anymore under Gavin Newsom.
I'm gonna say, so the policies just aren't there anymore.
Yeah.
But one that my favorite one, I would say, I'm gonna say Colorado. Easy. Colorado. I mean, the first time in the Rocky Mountains, I teared up. And it was just beautiful.
You've been part of the last two statewide, these two tours. What are you hearing? What's the number one issue you're hearing from folks as you crisscross the country?
Yeah, I'd say the number one issue is affordability. I mean, not being able to afford the basic needs. People are seeing that they're having to spend a lot more, close to $11,000 more this year, just to keep the same standard of living they had 3 or 4 years ago. And they're feeling that all across the board. It really doesn't matter. We're seeing single mothers, retirees, couple with 2 incomes and no kids still having that same response.
We're getting close to the upcoming election. I know one of the things that we've talked about a lot as we're gearing up, because we're not a battleground state at all. I mean, Donald Trump will win here. But if people start looking into Kamala Harris and the Democrats and their policies, one of the elements that I think folks aren't really realizing is the fact that they want to allow the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act to expire next year. And I'm really curious, as you've talked to folks on this bus tour, do people realize what that will do, what that will cost, what exactly Democrats are promising with their policies? Are they aware just how devastating Harris and the Democrats' policies could be?
So, unfortunately, no. I mean, not on a big enough scale. I'll say that there are a few events, and mostly it's the business owners that do understand it, because they saw what the Jobs Act did for their business. I had one guy, I believe in Montana, who said he was able to hire more employees because of the incentives from the Jobs Act. But we have a lot of people who we're talking to at events, just walk-ups, that before we went there weren't able to connect, let's say, this administration's policies with Bidenomics. They weren't able to connect that. But at these events, we're able to say, you got to look at these policies. To your point with Vice President Harris, a lot of people don't give her enough credit for the economic situation we're in. You got to remember that she's vice president in a very, very tight majority for the Democrats. So she casts a lot of the tie-breaking votes.
Deciding votes.
Exactly, the deciding vote. So if we look at the Inflation Reduction Act, she was a deciding vote. I mean, she has a track record, same as President Biden does. And those are the connections that we're making on the ground to these voters.
She prides herself on being the number 2 person in the room when it's convenient for her. And I think it's interesting you mention the business owners. They're the ones, like small business owners, who recognize that there was a 20% cut built into the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that'll go away. That is right there, a 20% tax increase on all small business owners if she has her way. And I hope that some of the events that you're doing, folks will realize that. We're talking with Javin Fulson, Grassroots Program Manager for Americans for Prosperity. Javin, tell me about some of the events you've helped with along with the tour as you've been going on, and one that stands out to you the most, say.
Yeah. So I'd say, I mean, the events we do have been so different. I mean, it's great. So we may do a gas event one day, but then we're going to do a tea event next day, like drinking tea event because cost tea's gone up, or a coffee event. So, I mean, the events are always different because we're seeing that higher prices are all across the board, not just happening in the grocery store, the gas station. Everything you buy nowadays is expensive, even cars. I wish we could give away cars like Oprah, but we can't do that. So to answer your question, my favorite event, that's a hard question. That's a hard question. Cause I mean, I'd say we did an event in Montana where we went to an Indian reservation and we went to a grocery store. And that was probably one of my favorite events because that area was very prone of leaning Democrat. It's a John Tester area, and they're very prone voting for John Tester again. And as we're talking to these individuals and speaking to them, and the business owner, he wasn't very aligned with us, but he knew something needed to change. But after we left, we had a handful of people come up to us and say, one, I never thought about it this way. Two, I'm not being told this. And three, how do I change my voting registration? So we had a lot of people who, once they were given the information, they understood that things had to change. So that was probably my favorite event because it wasn't this, we're just coming in just to change your mind and attack the way you think. It was, no, we're going to talk to you. We're going to have a discussion and we're going to educate each other on these policies. And there was a lot of value in that. And I believe events like that is how we get through to most voters in the country.
I think some of the neat things about these events is the diverse crowd. AFP did a gas event at a Jumpstart here in Wichita where they rolled back the price of gas to what it was on Joe Biden's inauguration day. And I tell you, the crowd, it wasn't all, straight white guys. It was a very diverse crowd in a really heavily Democrat district, actually. And all those folks understood. They recognized, hey, the price of gas today is $3 less than it is today. And it was because of AFP. And it was a great way of articulating, look, here's Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's policies. Yeah. So I think it's great that you're doing that.
I remember having an event in Philadelphia and some, I think it was a volunteer or an activist came up to me and was like, Javin, I am just so surprised that you are engaged as much as you are because most people who look like me don't have a conservative mindset. So they're like, Javin, this is something that you need to talk more about because it's a lot of identity politics that are getting in the way of actual progress in this country.
Yep. Do you think that people are having to make harder decisions this year compared to last year? I mean, if you look at it, the Harris campaign sure likes to tout, inflation is down, but inflation is still, depending on the poll, number one or number two issue right behind immigration. Again, depending on the poll, it seems to me like folks are still having to make hard decisions. Do I buy medicine? Do I pay for gas? Do I, put food on the table? I don't think things have gotten any better.
We had a young lady in Pennsylvania. When we were holding a gas event, and the day before, she realized that her gas tank was close to E. So as she was driving home from picking her kids up from school, she made the decision already that I have to decide between either going to work or bringing my kids to school because I don't have enough gas or money to do both. So she tells us she brings her kids, she goes home, wakes up the next morning, already knowing I'm not going to work today, so I'm going to call in. But for some reason, she didn't call in yet. So she's on her way to bring her kids to school, and she drives past our gas station. And she says she saw that she had to do a double take. She saw the line was long. So she said, maybe it's real. So she did a double take. So she drops her kids off. She comes back in line. And at that point, for us, gas was $2.38 a gallon. And I think what the average was, or what they were paying Pennsylvania, was like $3.50, I think, or $3.60. So she gets in the line and she asks one of our staff, is this real? Is gas real? $2.38. They say, yeah. She starts bawling out, crying. She starts tears trimming down her face because she realizes that she realized that she's going to be able to do everything she needs to do. Go to work, to put food on the table. Even though food costs more now, she's got to work more to pay for that. And then she's got to school. I think her kids were in daycare, so school's not free. So she has to work more to put her kids through school. And as we talked to her at the pump, she told us that she has not heard the click in like 2 years. The click meaning you got a full tank. So that was a very impactful story. I know we have that video of that story somewhere because I wasn't recording it, but one of my colleagues was with her in that story. But those were the kind of stories that we heard all across the country. And we had retirees who were saying, I can't live off my Social Security check anymore. It's become unattainable.
Yeah, and it does also illustrate how out of touch some in Washington, D.C. are. And that's the sad part, really. So this then begs the next question, Javin, which is, what are some solutions to these issues?
Yeah. I mean, if you took Economics 101, you would think it'd be simple solutions. Maybe stop printing money.
Stop spending.
Yeah, I mean, you would think it's just funny that the Inflation Reduction Act did the quite opposite of what the name says, just heighten inflation. But there's one: cut spending. We had these checks going out during COVID, and all these ominous spending bills that just added more money to the economy. The Build Back Better. We did not build back better. We were building back broke. It did not work. So there's the spending side. Energy, when it comes to gas and fuel, and even heating your house. Arizona, we've seen energy bills go up. Even me here, I'm not home very much, and apparently I'm using less energy than I did last year, but my bill's higher because energy has just gone up. So we need to unleash American energy, unleash American abundance. Like I mentioned earlier, HR 1, which was the Lower Energy Act. It would have lowered energy, would have made America more energy independent. It would have unleashed our energy, but it died in the Senate. We also have the labor reform, the PRO Act. Fortunately, that has not gone anywhere, but we are worried come an election what might happen with it. But those are the main topics that we want to focus on. And the regulations, we're seeing a lot more businesses. I mean, this current administration has decided, instead of looking for American affordability, to kowtow to the how do I say this? The liberal left that wants to cut all gas stoves. And that just increases energy bills because then they have to, believe it or not, these corporations are not eating the cost of these regulations. They're passing on to us. That's why we're paying so much. So
Right.
Regulations is the third biggest thing we focus on. So cutting spending, cutting regulation, and unleashing American abundance in the short term of it all.
No, and one of the things that I try and encourage my listeners on my Sunday night show is to get involved, to get activated, be it door knocking for AFP or joining in on that Thursday call where folks can dial in with AFP and dial into these federal races. They have to get engaged. They have to be involved, because if you're not, we're not going to change any of these policies. I try and encourage them. Some people can't write a check. If you can, great. If you can write a check. But if you can't, you've got to get involved, even if it's just as simple as making a phone call or writing a letter to the editor, or heck, putting a yard sign out, or go walk in a parade for somebody. But they have to get engaged, and they have to make their voices heard.
Yep. And as we do this, we are encouraging that. So we have times where we're like, hey, write a letter to your senator. If you want to come make some phone calls, please come do that. If you want to get engaged and start door knocking, please do that. If we encourage you to post on social media, make a video with us. And people love doing that. Take a photo with the RV. People really love taking a photo with the RV and with the vans when we have those. So, and that's the most important part, is that as we're giving away these things to people, is that there has to be an ask, and the ask is just be more engaged.
Well, Javin, again, I appreciate you joining us today. If folks want information on the Prosperity is Possible campaign and on the tour, they can visit prosperityispossible.com, correct?
Easy.
And if folks want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to connect with you? I'm assuming you're on social media.
I'm on every social media. Yep. Except for TikTok. No TikTok.
Yeah, me too.
No TikTok.
Not on TikTok.
But yeah, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Reach out to me. I would say your best option is probably Twitter or Facebook.
Yep. Likewise. Javin, I appreciate you again. Thank you for joining us. Folks, liberty and freedom are easily taken for granted. Don't take it for granted. Go out there and defend freedom and liberty. And most importantly, make your voice heard. And thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.